Good evening. Welcome. Just a quick note for students. If we have any students who need to check in, who might need credit from a teacher, and you haven't checked in, Rachel Meads is right here to check you in. So make sure to do that. Well, welcome everyone to the President's Lecture. I am Cindy Powers, the Director of Continuing Education and Lifelong Learning. And I will be introducing our speaker tonight because our president has lost her voice cheering on our football team on Saturday. This lecture tonight is part of the Year of Civility, which is a collaboration between Shepherd University and the Stubblefield Institute, focusing on civil discussion. Tonight, we are thrilled to hear from one of our esteemed community members, Harriet Pearson. For more than 30 years, Harriet has done pioneering work at the intersection of information technology, business, and regulation. She recently founded boutique consultancy Axia Advisory to provide clients with strategic and practical solutions in the areas of cybersecurity, data, and AI governance and policy. Until June 2024, Harriet was Executive Deputy Superintendent and Head of the Cybersecurity Division at the New York Department of Financial Services. She played a key role in updating their nation-leading cybersecurity regulation and deployed a comprehensive set of resources to help businesses comply with the new requirements. Previously, Harriet was a partner at Hogan Lovells, where she founded and led the global cybersecurity practice for a decade, starting in 2012, before transitioning to senior counsel in 2021. Among her representations were matters involving crisis management, investigations, and regulatory enforcement in the aftermath of high-profile cyber attacks. She joined Hogan Lovells after a 19-year career with IBM, where she served as the company's first security counsel and chief privacy officer, and held other executive roles spanning legal compliance, government affairs, human resources, and communications. Harriet led large global teams and represented the company externally to Congress, the White House, regulators, the media, advocacy organizations, and business leaders nationally and internationally. She has received numerous recognitions for her pioneering work in cybersecurity and data privacy law and policy, including North America Legal Innovator of the Year from Financial Times, in addition to many others. Harriet graduated with honors from Princeton University and UCLA School of Law and completed executive leadership training courses at Harvard Business School and Syed Business School of Oxford University. She has taught as adjunct lecturer at both the UCLA School of Law and Georgetown University, and is a member of the bar in New York and the District of Columbia. She has served on numerous advisory boards, including for the U.S. Department of Homeland Security and the Georgetown Cybersecurity Law Institute, which she co-founded in 2012 and co-chaired for 6 years. We are so fortunate that Harriet now lives in the Eastern Panhandle, where she and her husband own and co-lead 2 community-based ventures: the newly renovated Shepherdstown Opera House, the regional news publication, the West Virginia Independent Observer as well. She currently co-chairs the Grant Committee for Women Investing in Shepherd, also known as WISH, and chairs the Finance and Governance Board Committee of the Stubblefield Institute for Civil Political Communications here at Shepherd University. Harriet contributes to our community in a myriad of ways for which we are so grateful. I hope you will join us after this lecture for a reception. Sorry about that. A reception in the lobby of the Byrd Center. Please welcome Harriet Pearson.
Thank you. All right. And you know I pop a good popcorn. And for those that have bought popcorn and other things from me. Okay, so this is what I do when I'm not popping popcorn. And so thank you, the students, for coming. those of you who are here, I'm going to point some of my remarks to you, and then what I've tried to do in this talk is also make it general enough so that all of us who are just living in a community can find something interesting and valuable for us, each of us. So science, fiction, or fact, AI, risk, and what to do about it. I don't know how many of you, because it's an election year, let's start with an election example. There was a thing going around, right? I mean, there's a thing going around, all sorts of things go around on the internet, but there was a thing going around a few weeks ago about one of the presidential candidates being involved in a hit-and-run accident. I don't know if anybody saw that. Anybody see it? Some of you did. And false, right? And fact check, no such thing. Now, politics has always been part of, there are all sorts of tricks and techniques used in politics. But I'm starting with this particular example because, a quick fact check, yeah, it's not true. But it made its way out. And it made its way out with a pretty convincing photo. And one of the science fiction or fact points here is that because of advances in what's known as artificial intelligence, the creation, the dissemination, the presentation of this kind of stuff is easier than it has ever been. And one of the reasons I'm so passionate about serving with the Stubblefield Institute for Civil Political Communications is that I've seen firsthand the risks and the mischief that can be done using these kinds of digital technologies. So this is an example of something that's, this stuff has happened before, but it's happening more with the advent of tools that we can call AI, but which are more easily in lots of people's hands. So that's just a warm up to say, what are we going to talk about here for the next few minutes? And we're going to do a bird's eye tour, which means we're going to float above a lot of stuff. We're not, for those who are interested in learning about technology, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to more float through the issues because I think it's more interesting on a Tuesday night, frankly. And I hope we take away something that's meaningful to us rather than sit through. I'm not an academic. I've taught in academia, but practical stuff, right? So we're going to do a little bit of what is AI, just to level set at a very high level, and what are the risks. And we'll also talk a little bit about the upsides, and then what is being done about it, and end with a little bit of a couple of tips to us as individuals, what we can do. So that's really the structure. And if you have a burning question, please feel free to shoot a hand up. I'm okay with that. We'll save some time at the end, and you all know, most of you know where to find me anyway if you ever want to talk about this kind of stuff. I'm happy to talk about it. As Cindy was describing, I've been around a little bit, and I'm just going to say just a few words of warning. I'm not a technologist, although I've been around the tech industry my entire career. So don't ask me any super duper technical questions. I've taught, so I have a sense a little bit of what students are interested in and also what opportunities there are for careers, not just in law but in other areas. So that's part of my DNA a little bit. I've worked inside industries and I've worked for companies. So my primary DNA is about looking at the world through the eyes of organizations. But I'm trying to be a little bit dispassionate now that I'm in my latter phase of my career. And what I found really valuable is the last year I took on a special assignment with a government agency and was a real gosh darn regulator. And so that really informed a part of what I'm going to say as well. So that's my little disclaimer. And so let's talk about what is AI. So perhaps you know who these folks are. And one of the reasons I call it science fiction or fact is some of us have been around for more than 20 years on the world, or on Earth, and we go back a few decades. We remember. I grew up in the Star Trek era. I was a die-hard Trekkie. I love Star Trek. I love science fiction. And the potential for what the future could be and the dystopian future was all fascinating to me. And this, I think, is Spock and Star Trek go back to 66, 69, something like that. And yes, got a Trekkie there. So the possibilities of being able to say, computer, make me a meal, computer, do this, and have it talk back to you, that was really cool. Well, that was science fiction, but it's actually fact now. It is absolute fact. It's happened already, and the future is arriving. It's going to arrive unevenly. It's going to come here, but it's here for many folks, and it's coming even faster. The picture on the right takes us forward a few decades, and this is from 2011. And anybody know what this is? Jeopardy, right? This is, I forgot the guy's name. Yes, he beat Ken? Ken, yes. I remember watching this, and I was with IBM at that point. And I sometimes joke and say I was Watson's first lawyer. Watson's is the name of the computer system, an AI, machine learning system that beat him at Jeopardy pretty handily. And that's an example of AI, 2011. And what happened? So what is AI? And what was different about the fact that you had a computer system beat somebody at Jeopardy? And before then, actually, a few years prior, there was another stunt that involved chess, the game of chess. So these are examples of AI. And AI is a very broad definition. It includes anything basically where machines and computers act on tasks or perform tasks that we would all think normally require human intelligence, which is a humongously broad definition. But basically what happens is you have a bunch of data, and then you use math. You use mathematical formulas called algorithms that are computerized, and I know some of you understand this stuff. They operate together, and they create an output. It's very vague, right? But that's the definition. It's a very broad envelope. And the history of AI goes back to the 1950s. There have been lots of developments over the years. And if you look to the logos on the left, we have been collectively living with the outputs of artificial intelligence systems, not only before the Jeopardy show on 2011, but since then we've been living with Google. What happens when you type a word in the search bar? You get suggestions. That's an example of predictive modeling that Google says, oh, people have done this search, and here are the options. That's AI at work. Spotify, they suggest music that people like you might like. Amazon, when we go shop, you get the suggestions, the recommendations. That's AI at work. And same with Netflix. Recommendation engines, those are all examples. But what happened November 30th, 2022? That was really kind of a turning point. If anybody, it's a trick question, but I don't expect anybody to know that particular date. But the hint is whatever happened that date, within a few months, that had a record number of users, 100 million. Anybody hazard a guess? Right. Very smart people here, very smart. So the introduction of ChatGPT, free version, is what happened on November 30th. And what happened with that, and remember, I'm not a technical person, so if I botch this, anybody who has a better explanation, please say so later, or now if you want. But it's basically the kind of AI that was used by companies like IBM was a form of, there was a lot of data, and you throw a lot of compute power to it, and ask it questions and out pop answers. What ChatGPT and OpenAI, the company that created it, did was use a different kind of machine learning called deep learning that was modeled on neural networks. They used models of our own brain where things get wired together in layers and in really complicated ways. And then they threw a lot of compute power at immense amounts of data and used an entirely different paradigm for what machine learning could look like, and created something called ChatGPT that then they thrust out into the universe and put it in the hands of consumers. That was a huge, huge disruption in what was going on in the world of tech, what was going on in the world of business and policy. It's not that other companies like Google or other large organizations like that, it's not that they didn't have this kind of stuff happening. They had research projects. They had projects using this kind of neural networks, they were not ready to put them out into the marketplace. They weren't thrusting them out into the hands of all of us to use. That's really what was disruptive about what happened in November 2022. And it really set out red alarms in companies in the tech industry who said, we thought we had years to enjoy the fruits of our current business models. We thought we had years to figure out how to deploy these capabilities in a responsible way. And I'm sure, although I have no affiliation with IBM at this point, it set off alarms in companies that serve other businesses to say, oh my goodness, we better accelerate what we're doing, because the biggest and best uses for this kind of capability will be in other industries using it to serve their customers. So this was a huge, huge event. And we're living in a little bit of an echo from that, as now what you're seeing is an incredible acceleration in the effort to bring these capabilities to the public and obviously to the market. The stock prices of the main players here have been going all sorts of directions. Let me just say that. So now we're in an era of what is now known as Gen AI, or generative AI. Have folks heard that phrase? Yeah? How about the students? Have you heard about generative AI? You know, right? So this is what the current model that people are talking about is called. And here, not only you have data plus algorithms, but algorithms that are more than just operations on data. They actually have injected within them reasoning capabilities. And they predict and they create original content, like ChatGPT. Write me a poem about, and then you tell it what you want it to write about. A red sky and a blue day and a blah, 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 and you get something out that may be original. It certainly didn't exist before you asked about it. So Gen AI is you're getting original or new content that you can tailor. And these pictures are examples of the fairly large number of products and even companies that have come forward using these capabilities to now offer things that any of us could go use. And truth and disclosure here, on the cover sheet of the presentation, I basically retired from my nice government job and said, I better hang out a shingle. And I haven't done much to promote my shingle. To the point where when President Hendricks asked me to do this lecture, I said, oh, do I have to? I guess I do. Here I am. And so I said, well, let me experiment with using these capabilities as we create this. So some parts of this, I have to say, were generated with ChatGPT, including the logo for my little consultancy. On the cover, I said to ChatGPT, create a logo for me, a professional services logo with blue and white, blah, blah, blah. One stroke later, here it is. And I feel really bad about that. I really feel bad about that. But not that bad. I put it on here because I thought it would be interesting. And somewhere out in social media, because I thought nobody would come tonight, so I put something out, and somebody posted back yesterday evening, AI is terrible for writers and authors. Somebody, I don't know if that person is here, but she's right. She's right. Or it could be the biggest gift. I don't know which it is, but it's a double-edged sword. It definitely is, because this and things like it, illustrators, writers, you get paid for your craft, and some of the craft has been taken out of this. And yeah, that's one of the consequences. So these kinds of uses, ChatGPT, Strawberry is the latest version of ChatGPT. If anybody's heard of it, it's now got even more power. It's got reasoning now, and it has more logic in it. So it feels closer and closer to the kind of entity where it passes the Turing test. Actually, even the first version of ChatGPT felt like you're talking to a person if you've not tried it. How many people have tried ChatGPT? How many have not? So you get homework. It's really, really easy. And I actually will implore you to tomorrow get a cup of coffee and set yourself up and work with it, because at any age, it is really important to know what's going on here. And your imagination will will be I don't know, inspired. Maybe you'll be inspired. Maybe you'll be horrified. But this is huge, and I'm not even prone to exaggeration. I mean, when the internet first came out in the 90s, it's like, yeah, that's kind of cool. I mean, it's cool. It was transformative. I didn't get hyped up about it. This, I think, is the most significant thing that's happened in technology, information technology, ever, that I know of. So it really is something. Go try it. So ChatGPT with its new version, these things are free. You can try them, play with them. These are similar things. Gemini is Google's answer. So now when you go search, when you type a search in the Google bar, the first result you get below the search bar is, it has these little, I don't know what you call these diamonds. That's the AI working. That AI has already crawled through all the results that Google would have presented to you anyway, and still does in a sequential manner, ranked as they have typically been ranked, but AI has crawled through them and they've summarized it right up top. And it's actually kind of useful as long as it's right. It may or may not be. If you dig into the disclosures for both ChatGPT and Gemini and other things, they won't say that it's going to be right. They say, well, it could be wrong. It might be wrong. But it's kind of an interesting thing and useful. So Gemini is Google's answer in part. Dolly I used to, I was playing with that, and it's also owned by OpenAI, the makers of ChatGPT, and it's a visual Gen AI. It is text to image. And I was looking for a piece of furniture, and I said to Dolly, give me a picture of a beige cushion on top of an ottoman with a blah, blah, blah on it. And by golly, there it was. And it rendered it like that. It's free. You can try it. This, I bet you nobody knows here, unless you're a programmer. You don't know what this logo is. This is GitHub, G-I-T-H-U-B. And if you're a coder, you know what GitHub is. You use it to paste your code in, to manage it, to store it, et cetera. This GitHub has a co-pilot now. And it will take anybody who knows anything about doing coding, and it's like getting an engine strapped to you. And it's like, boom. You can code faster, and now you have a co-pilot helping you. And for those who are using Microsoft, Microsoft's trying to push Copilot Microsoft onto you too. I haven't accepted that one yet, but everyone's in it. Everyone's doing this. So it's all over the place now, in consumer hands. Now, in the tech industry, and maybe other industries, but I grew up in the work world all the time talking about new things, and everyone would say, what's the use case? What's the use case? Use cases is how do you actually take this nifty thing and use it for something that actually makes money, generates value, does something helpful. And use cases here abound for this kind of stuff. And okay, truth and disclosure, 15 things. I asked ChatGPT, what can we use generative AI for? What are the key use cases? Here's what ChatGPT said. So in one sense, it's a shortcut. I didn't have to do a lot of work here. On the second, but alternatively, it is kind of cool that it was able to generate so many so fast, and I do not disagree with any of them. This is entirely right. It is likely a very incomplete list, but just pick a few. Content generation or creation. I have seen and read about and heard novelists who are debating, writers, authors who are debating use AI in writing or not. It is a big battle in that space. And some say, of course I'm going to use it. It's going to give me first drafts. It's going to help me get faster. I go to market faster, et cetera, et cetera. And others who are saying it's abominable. It's an abomination to do this. So that battle has started and will rage in that community. In the marketing world, this is gold because it will help generate more of the content marketing that influences all of us when people go out. I mean, it's just endless what it can be done. Image design, code generation, and debugging. Debugging is the act of taking flaws in software and getting rid of them. So maybe that'll speed it up. On the other hand, the flip side, on the negative side, cyber attackers take this kind of capability and create negative, bad software and deploy attacks much more frequently and faster. So there's a plus and a minus to almost all of these. Customer support and communication, you see it everywhere. Do you want to chat? You go online, you have a chat bot coming at you. You're seeing it, but you're not seeing it so much yet in things like healthcare. But it's coming. But healthcare and other critical capabilities like that are slower to take up these capabilities because of the risks. And legal assistance, in my own field, I feel a little job security, not that I need it anymore, but still, is the lawyers aren't going to be sent home anytime soon because there's a lot of certainty that's required for some of the aspects of law. Anyway, these are the use cases. So the rest of this discussion is we're going to talk about what could go wrong. There's all sorts of positives. And one of the coolest things, number 7, education and training. I was reading about a bot. If you have a session with the ChatGPT or something like a similar product, you'll find as you converse with it in your own natural language, you can do it typing or orally, that the machine has endless patience. No matter what you ask it, no matter how long you go. And there have been all sorts of people now trying to show use cases, show the pluses and minuses, make sure people understand the capabilities. One of them had to do with engaging someone and talking to them about what they believed, the conspiracy theories, or the beliefs they had. It's like, oh, why do you think the earth is flat? Oh, that's interesting. How about this? How about that? How about this and that and the other? And there was a study done, and it wasn't the flat earth, it was other kinds of political beliefs. And after a while, the chat had the discussion with the AI resulted in the person changing views. Now, I'm not a psychologist, but this ability to interact with an inanimate object, a screen basically, to do so in a way where the interface that you're dealing with is very polite, never loses their temper, is very respectful, and will endlessly talk to you, that has an impact, and it can result in the changing of views for better or for not better, right? So, but education and training, the powerful examples would be foreign language instruction, writing instruction, having the time to individually engage students where they are and teach and disseminate and help them grow. It's a powerful use case, but the flip side is also there. So I thought that was one of the more interesting things that have been published recently. So what could go wrong? I don't think this is exactly a picture from Space Odyssey 2001, but that is one of my favorite movies. The what could go wrong? I think this is, but yeah. So basically, the image to hold in is that these capabilities right now are extensions of humans, like cyborg type things. So your abilities are amplified, and yeah, what science fiction has taught us, what could go wrong? So I created a very simple way of thinking about this because I do want us to remember something about what I'm talking about in terms of what are the risks. And there are literally 1,000. But it's not going to do us any good to get into the 1,000 because we just don't have the time. We're not going to remember it. So I think it's helpful to think about a category of 3 types of risks. Now, remember I said the AI is about the data. You're gathering information, and then you're taking software that really is doing mathematical calculations according to rules. That's an algorithm, and the algorithm is operating on the data. So the kinds of risks are what goes in, which is the data, what goes into the box where the AI is operating, what comes out, what happens, and what does the output do, or what is it capable of doing, and that's really at a system level. And then broader than that are the risks of when you have a lot of this stuff going on, what's the system-wide risk? How do you govern that? What are the issues at that level? So let's just go through and go through those 3 areas. And let me just do a quick time check. I have no idea what time it is. 7. Okay, we're good. So what could go wrong? Inputs. So garbage in, garbage out. If you have bad data to begin with, whatever's going to pop out of ChatGPT or Gemini or anything else is going to be garbage. So one of the issues there is if you're going to use a high-quality vendor, a respected organization that's done a lot of work to clean data or select good data, that's going to reduce the risk. But if you're going to be gathering outdated data or not enough data, that's an issue in the quality of whatever the AI is going to produce. The lawyers would like to understand whether the data was legally obtained. And what was going around a few days ago, I think it started, is how many of you are on LinkedIn? If you're, so students, you should all be on LinkedIn. Piece of career advice, get yourself on LinkedIn so that you have a profile, all that. So if you go on LinkedIn and you go into the settings, this was a hot debate in my world, at least, the last few days, and you see that they have now automatically opted all LinkedIn members to sharing their data with LinkedIn for purposes of improving their generative AI. And the conversations that have been had is, how dare they do that? They should have asked us to opt in, or at least told us about this, and somebody discovered it and started posting it, and so it's been going around, and I promptly removed myself and said, turned it off, because I wasn't sure what they were going to do with this. But the question really raised as part of this is not only is that surprising your customers or surprising your consumers is really not a good idea, but what are they legally compliant with the regulations applicable to this collection of information when this opt-out was automatically turned on? That's kind of a niche example, but what about data privacy laws? What about IP and copyright? If you're going around scraping information off of websites where the information itself is copyright protected, whose right is it? You may have read about the New York Times suing some of these AI engines and now negotiating to get lots of money in return for their content being used to train some of these AI's systems. So that's an issue. And for every error here or gap, there could also be malfeasance. So was the data poisoned? And I've practiced a lot. I've worked a lot on cybersecurity specifically, and this is one of those areas where it's a nightmare that really hasn't come to pass yet, but it's a nightmare we worry about. And certainly when I was in the regulatory world, we worried about it, which is what happens if bad actors deliberately poison information, inject information, somehow, for example, in a bank account or in a ledger, take those numbers and switch them around. What effect could that have? Because the data's poisoned. And then is data free from bias, which is one of the, probably the most, the press picks up on this issue a lot, and for understandable reasons. So what happens if information that comes in is already laden with biases that exist in our society today, and just because it goes into a computer and it's used then to help make decisions or steer things or maybe even make recommendations about certain students should do this, or certain employees might want to be asked to do certain other things, what makes that data free of any of the inherent biases that we have as humans, whether it's based on gender, race, or something else? You don't know. You don't know. So these are risks related to what goes into the engine. Risks related to the outputs. The first and foremost is the fact is none of this is right all the time. And sometimes you just get made up answers, and it has to do with the kind of neural networks and the way the algorithms write, where they make up things because that's the way that's the way it works. If they want to provide an answer, and they'll just make something up. And I remember I was doing some work for the Women Investing in Shepherd, the WISH committee. Somebody had asked me a question, and I said, I'm going to try. No, it wasn't you. It was Bev. Bev asked me a question, and I did something, and I said, let me ask ChatGPT something. And I said, it gave me an answer. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. And I relayed that to Bev, and I said, oh, da-da-da, here's what, 82%. And then I said, well, you know what? I know better than this. I'm a very seasoned lawyer. I never, ever, that was the first time in decades, I actually shot an answer off to someone without actually going back to primary source. And we have a judge in the house, so I'm definitely saying that that's definitely what I do. And I said, oh, I shouldn't have done that. I'm going to go back and find the primary source. So I said, ChatGPT, tell me where this came from. And it refused to tell me, and I interrogated it, and I started yelling at the thing, and I got it to admit 5 minutes after I typed all sorts of things, it was made up. It hallucinated. And then I said to myself, I'm so glad this happened to me now, because if it had happened to me in any other context, I would have been absolutely floored, mortified. So I quickly, corrected it, but be very careful. It will make things up, and I saw it myself, and it was just an amazing thing. And so for students, for anybody submitting work like this, when you're using these capabilities, you cannot rely on it. You have to have human intermediation or some kind of check. The same capabilities in the hands of a bad actor can be used to inflict harm. If you take what's known as a foundational model, if you take a raw AI model and stick it into a use where the purpose is to generate bad content, false content, it can be misused. And if guardrails aren't programmed in, it could actually create answers or content that is not the kind of thing we tolerate in our society. So there are examples of that as well. So that's the output. In terms of the broader risks, governance, this is more, if you're worried about clarity, if one company sells a model to another company who then uses it, there are questions lawyers love. It's like, who actually is responsible for the operation of the system? Who owns it? All that stuff. I won't go into that because that's kind of dull, but the risks that everyone, I think, needs to be concerned about and aware of, number one, sustainability. It takes a heck of a lot more energy to process enormous amounts of data and do these very compute-intensive operations to the point where, I have a picture of it later, Microsoft just cut a deal with the owners of 3 Mile Island to reactivate part of the nuclear facility there because it needs that much energy for what it's doing. If you think about data centers, this is relevant to us locally as well. Data centers already need huge amounts of energy. This is taking it and going way up in terms of the needs. So huge demands on energy and very significant rare metal demands as well. The kinds of metals or mineral resources that are not, the main source are not in the United States only. It's other places. So those are like society-wide impacts that we just need to appreciate. In addition to, and this is one bullet point that is so large we could spend a whole class thinking about this, which is economic displacement and dislocation, which is what careers, what jobs are going to be fundamentally, hugely changed, eliminated perhaps. And on the other hand, the positive one, what fields that we do not know yet exist are going to exist? And who knows? This is going to take 25 years, 50 years to really pan out. But you could see the start of it. There's a job type called prompt engineer. Has anyone heard? I mean, it's just the specialty of formulating queries, prompts to the AI in order to get quality output out again. And I appreciate that because, I think this is maybe the comeback of grammar. The reason to understand grammar is the way you structure a sentence or a prompt to an AI will get you a much better result if you do it well. That's a good reason. Grammar is like math. You have to have the right formulation and you get the right answers out. But who knows? Every sector will have an impact. If you're a teacher, if you're a student, if you're I don't know. I can't think of a single field that won't be affected. The other, beyond economic, cultural and social, is we already are glued to our stuff, right? And we are seeing a backlash to that. Congress, I think, passed a social media kid regulation bill out of the House Commerce Committee just recently, bipartisan. The Senate's already overwhelmingly voted for it. It's stuck, probably won't pass this election year, but it might. And that will clamp down on kids' safety on these social media, online platforms. That is a really significant marker in the tolerance that our country has for what's happening with our kids. But who knows whether or not it will go. It is relevant only to a subset of our population. The issue of over-dependence on these capabilities is going to be with us. It's going to get worse before it ever gets better. And polarization created when you are having a one-to-one engagement with media that give you more of what you want, we already see it happening. And it's very relevant, obviously, for any election year, but for anything. So these are big risks. And then finally, there's the existential risk, which means, is this going to wipe us out? It's going to wipe us off the face of the earth? I have no idea. All I can say is that in last spring, this is just one example, an open letter with 350 people, including Bill Gates, including leaders from OpenAI, from a lot of different sectors of people who actually invented this stuff, have developed this stuff, understand this stuff, wrote an open letter to the world saying, hey, we might wipe ourselves off the earth. We better do something about this before it's too late. We all have things to do. We're all very busy, and out of the corner of my eye, I've been reading this as we go on doing our daily tasks, and I'm like, what? What? I never, ever have I seen anything like this from people who know what they're talking about. And I don't want to believe this, but I think it is believed by many in government, which is why actually governments are stepping up and starting to do stuff to try to prevent this from happening. The highest probability use case for something that is existential level, I believe, is a biohazard event. And having lived through the last pandemic, one could just imagine what that might look like, where AI is used to either intensify the effect or create something or just have it happen in a way that is bad. So that's an example. So this level of risk is beyond any of the little things that I just talked about. It's there, and people disagree about it. There are others who say, yeah, that's science fiction. But yeah, the other risks are real. We got to work on them, and we're nowhere close to being close to this, but it's there. So what do? So I am going to do another quick time check. Yes. Right on schedule. So what can be done? So this is just my view. This is my pragmatic view. I think there are 4 different types of buckets of action, and I'm just going to kill my own punchline. Individual action. While I'm exhorting us all to get familiar with this and use it and all that, I'm going to end with a couple of points here. I think individual action is the least important here, and I'm sad to say that. I think a lot of the burden here rests with government, and it rests with private sector, not the companies that are going to use this so much. Or they're going to be regulated. There's going to be a lot of that, but the companies that are inventing this. I think the large amount of the burden is going to have to be on them, and but there's a ton of activity here, huge amount, and a lot of opportunity for those who want to enter the space and get engaged. Students, I'm looking at you, because data science, I mean, there are anybody working in data science now, these fields are growing, and there's going to be need for not only people to create, but also to take care of and create the guardrails. So in terms of law and regulation, once again, disclosure, I used a free text-to-picture engine called Perchance. And I asked Perchance to create for me a patchwork quilt featuring the letters A and I. And there it is. And please note that there's an E. Why? I do not know. So poor quality. But it makes the point. So the patchwork is meant to say that there's all sorts of stuff happening. There's no one framework or no one law. Is a lot of patchwork, particularly when we're talking about the globe. So let's start with the smallest unit and move our way up. So New York City, interestingly enough, was kind of a first mover. I think they did this in um, it was before the pandemic, I want to say, 2019 or so. New York City was created a law that said if an automated decision tool, basically an AI system, is used in the process of hiring, that the and is the predominant factor being used to select workforce, to hire individuals, that the company had to have a disclosure that it was doing so and a bias audit performed yearly to make sure that they were being transparent, they were watching over bias issues, again, going back to gender, race, other factors. This may, I was still practicing law at that point. This was huge. I went out and I told all sorts of clients about this, and they kind of shrugged a little bit. And I looked at it and I said, well, it'll be interesting to see how it pans out. What turned out with this law is they said if it's an AI system is the predominant way the decision is made. And it hasn't had any effect really yet. New York City actually wants to amend it to have more of an impact, but what it showed is that AI is not the dominant factor in hiring. Lots of AI-powered systems exist to screen revenues, to screen resumes and make hiring decisions, but there's always a human involved. At least the companies in New York City always have a human involved, and so there hasn't been much of an impact from this. California is considering a bill that takes New York and tries to close loopholes as well. So New York City tried, this is like the first shot at this issue. Second, it's an election year. This was just from a few days ago. The ease with which you can generate a picture, and maybe you've seen this on the internet too, there was some wonderful, interesting visuals of the two main presidential candidates dancing with each other or carrying rifles. Each one had different things, ridiculous pictures that looked so real. Or the meme that I showed you earlier, the false story. The states, some of the states, you can see here, the blue is where legislation has already been enacted. Yellow is under consideration. West Virginia, I don't think is colored in, but it's making it illegal to create a false image and put it out there. I don't have any view, because I haven't thought about it too hard, of the constitutionality of those kinds of provisions, but they're all over. And so that's an example of state-based law. And at the federal level, what I'll say is that the executive branch has set in motion a huge amount of work. This issue, the AI agenda for the Biden administration, coincidentally, has been led by Kamala Harris, who comes from Silicon Valley, who understands that milieu. And it's a ambitious, comprehensive, and in my personal view, a pretty smart agenda. And it's kicked off actually before October 23 with a kind of a Bill of Rights for individuals in AI, but this executive order issued October 30th is basically, here's what the US federal government's going to do about AI. And in it, it's one of the longest executive orders ever issued. It has something for every agency to do. I know when I worked this past year in the financial services industry, the US Treasury Department was leading a multi-agency effort to implement what it was ordered to do, which is every single federal agency, and I know, Mary, you have a friend who's senior in one of the agencies, but every single federal agency has to have an accountable person to lead the AI strategy for that agency. That's just a very small example of what's being done. So that executive order also asked the U.S. Commerce Department, which is the home for a standards agency called NIST, which is now a National Institute for Standards and Technology, right here in Maryland, to issue standards on AI, particularly risk. So NIST has already issued a risk framework that's pretty good, actually. So all sorts of activities here. Legislation, no. There have been, I think at last call, 120 pieces of legislation introduced in Congress, but Congress for now well over a decade has been stuck. There have been proposals to create federal level privacy law that is actually very related to what needs to be done here in AI that have been stuck. And even though there's bipartisan agreement, even though many of the states have now just not waited for the feds and just gone ahead and acted, even though industry supports regulation in the privacy area, Congress has not been able to act. No prospect here that the Congress is going to act here. The federal agencies is where the action is. Contrast that to Europe. Europe is known for being very proactive and creating comprehensive regulation on difficult issues cutting across all of Europe. The AI Act has been enacted. It's starting to take effect. And basically what the European Union does is say to any entity that's creating or using an AI system and their definitions, they say if you are going to use it for a very high risk activity, don't do it. If you're going to use it for other types of activities that have risk, then do the following 25 things. So they're actually saying what you need to be doing. You need to do a risk assessment. You need to document the risk. You've got to show that you're mitigating them. You've got to design all that stuff. So they have been unafraid to just wade in and say, here's what you got to do. The challenge, of course, is in the devil's in the detail. And what does that implementation look like? And what is the impact on innovation in Europe, where all the key players in this industry are based elsewhere, not Europe. They're based here in the United States and a few other countries. So it has a big impact on their economy potentially, but it is the approach that has been used. And then contrast that to China, just as another example. What China has done is they actually were first among major countries to implement law on controlling AI, and it's interesting to see that China's approach has nothing to do with safety per se. It doesn't have anything to do with risk. It has everything to do with the content, which is thou shalt not post content or allow systems that will post content derogatory of the government or be obscene. And fake news. You can't do fake news. Now, the devil's in the detail. And this, I am not meaning to provoke any political discussion, but what is fake news? So we have something here called the First Amendment. Other countries aren't burdened with that or have to grapple with it, but who will decide what is fake news in China? So that's the other paradigm here of attempting to regulate immediately, Europe regulating comprehensively the commercial or private sector activities, and the US taking a really complex and decentralized but centrally coordinated approach that says, okay, this is going to affect everybody. Everybody go do something about this and check in. That's the U.S. approach. And then, of course, you've got the cities and the states. So it becomes very, very complex. So what's the market doing? So that's government. And the market is responding as markets do. Markets respond to fix problems or go after opportunities. So I mentioned 3 Mile Island. One of the issues for the market is, hey, it's going to take a lot of energy. It's expensive. Energy can be scarce in some places. What do we do? So the market's reacting and trying to find power sources. So a big boost for alternative ways of getting energy with the climate change and kind of the transition to non-carbon-based fuels, expect a push for nuclear and solar. The market is also responding and rewarding companies that are well situated to perform in this area, like NVIDIA, which has become the most valuable company around now, which makes a very specialized chip that's used to do the very energy and data intensive computing that the kind of chips that we have in our laptops or home computers can't even touch. So they make a very specialized chip. They've been in this area for a long time, and they were lucky enough to be around and have the right product. What else is the market doing? There's a lot happening in the private sector. And so examples. If any company is going to take an AI system and deploy it for anything of consequence, healthcare or anything, having a human in the loop is what is smart to do. I mean, the only way not to have a human is like low consequence things, like recommending your next song or, answering some level 1 customer service questions. But beyond that, you're going to need a human in the loop. There's something called model cards, which is if you're going to be interacting with an AI model or system, Google has created the phrase, I think, is some sort of notice that says, hi, here I am, here's the system, here's how it works. Here's the kind of stuff it does. Here's what goes into it. So it actually is like a food label. It says, here's the data that went in, et cetera, et cetera. Explainability. I think the biggest providers and creators of AI systems are engineering explainability so that if an answer pops out of a system, you can ask, well, how did it get that answer? And they will be able to explain, which is a really technically a very difficult thing I've come to understand, because when you have the neural networks working in the black box that is AI, how did it happen? Sometimes they just can't tell. So that requiring or looking for explainability can actually probably mitigate a lot of risk, because it just says, I don't want to use a system that can tell me how I got the information. That's probably a smart thing. People are inventing tools that are going to mitigate the risk of bias. Content watermarking. You know, if I'm going to use my logo someplace, my new generated 1-minute logo, you know, if I in a year or two, if I generate it, will it come with a watermark in it that says generated by ChatGPT? And will somebody be able to look and see, so you can understand where it came from? You know, more and more, I think, how do you know? You go on the internet, you go on Facebook, you go on whatever you use. How do you know? Right? In a small community like this, you kind of have a sense of who's who, but eventually, how do you know that this is real or not? Who generated it? If you're a teacher or a student, you know, did you write this? One of my community friends sent me an example. One of his children was doing a science fair experiment, and she was looking at six examples of somebody had written out a science experiment with the protocol. You know, in science, you have to have a control, you have to hypothesis, and here's my method, blah, blah, blah. And there were 6 examples. Which one was written by an AI and which one was written by a human? And I looked at them. I couldn't tell. I could not tell at all. Some had been generated by AI. And so she's running an experiment to see if anybody can tell. Now, how do you know? I mean, when I taught my class at UCLA, I was starting to think about it. It was 2021. It wasn't past that November 22 date. Maybe it was close to 22, but it wasn't enough so that I would say I had to think about how to judge whether the assignment I gave was being written by an AI, but now you have to. So content watermarking and ways of figuring out, is this real or not, are definitely coming and are being invented. And in my own profession, you know, I helped start an organization called the IAPP, the International Association of Privacy Professionals. We formed it in 2000, the year 2000. And there were like 15 of us. And now it has over 80,000 members. And actually, they're just having a conference in LA this week. And 80,000 members. I served on its board for 10 years. And IAPP, not being a dummy, this association said, you know, when you are privacy people, you're managing data, you're helping organizations manage data well. So let's get in on this AI stuff. So they've created this AI governance professional certification, and they've already got 1,000 people who've signed up and are, you know, certified. That's the market responding to a problem or a need or an opportunity. And so we're just going to be seeing lots of this, which is interesting. I mean, at least it's interesting for those looking for opportunities. There's a lot of opportunity in change and new stuff. And then there's, you know, kind of what is the answer here? And I'm not going to bore you with walking through all of this, but there are advocates. There are civil society is another way of saying NGOs or advocates who are out championing the public good. And there have been organizations like the Electronic Frontier Foundation, Electronic Privacy Information Center, Center for Democracy and Technology here in the US, equivalent organizations in Europe that have been all about online issues, online safety, privacy. Almost all of them have now pivoted, and they're working on AI as well. But notice here, these universal guidelines for AI, which were created kind of their various versions of them at the United Nations, the OECD, other places, 2018. People have been thinking about this for years. Now, you see these principles are going to be reflected in legislation and regulation everywhere around the world, and it's going to be expressed in different ways. American model, Europe model, China, kind of a top-down government model. But these are basically, things like, if you have an AI system, the right to transparency is, what's going on? Where's the stuff coming from? Explain to me there's explainability. Explainability is somewhere buried in here. The right to human determination. If somebody's going to use this system to make a decision, fire me, hire me, diagnose me, something like that, there better be a human involved. Be fair. Don't use them in secret. These are all concepts that have been part of data protection law, part of civil rights law. They're just now being refreshed for purposes of AI. So ultimately, we as individuals, what can we do? This is kind of the punchline that I kind of undercut before, which is I actually think most of the action at the moment is with our government and our elected officials and companies who care about their reputation and care about managing the risks that they don't want to take on either. But I do think, particularly in election years, but any year, I think we need to be, as a society, much more careful consumers of information online. And be very careful about what we share that we don't want to have put into the world. But really be careful, be skeptical. And this is where the institutions that have historically intermediated between the world and us, the newspapers, news on television, radio, the institutions, educational institutions, the diminishing of trust in those kinds of institutions and the diminishing of the numbers of those institutions is a problem. Because now all of us, can be our own editors. We can just consume all this information. And you know what? A large part of it is going to be fake. It's going to be created by troll farms in North Korea, in Iran, or Russia, or China, and fed here because of national security or other purposes. And we won't know unless somebody helps us figure out what this stuff is. So think critically. I think it just puts a premium on being skeptical and a little more civil about other people's opinions, because we're all going to have this operating around us. So that's a big piece. Explore AI, particularly help those who are younger and have to be native in this. Help them teach you. My son has taught me a lot more than I've taught him. Let me just say that. And then, although, asking government officials, depends on the government official, but AI is pervasive. So almost any elected official at the federal level should be on a committee or should be knowledgeable about something going on here. At the local level, probably not so much yet, but it's coming. So those are my thoughts about individuals. And now I'll just open it up to see if anybody has any comments or questions, and I appreciate your coming out to have a listen. Thank you. Anybody? Are we good on time? Yeah. Okay.
Is this working? Yeah. Does anyone have any questions?
Thank you so much. I learned so much tonight. Can you share your perspectives on...
What's your name?
Richard Anson. I
Nice to
live
see you,
near
Ed.
Shepherdstown. Could you share your perspectives on what should faith leaders do, given just the ramifications that AI has? Do you have any perspectives on that?
Faith leaders?
Yes.
I don't know. Does anybody have any suggestions? I think I would ask, one of my favorite, I like British mysteries, British murder mysteries, and one of my favorites is Father Brown. So I don't know. That's silly, I guess. But I would experiment with it yourself, because it might unlock ways of accessing the documents and the doctrine that's important, like Bible study or kind of that might be interesting, just to make accessing doctrine easier for everybody in a way that's very patient and very interesting. And I suspect somewhere in a faith-based organization, someone's using AI to create something interesting. So that's one idea. That's more of a positive one. The negative one, or the risk mitigation measure, would be to kind of use examples like this to say not everything you see is true, and just helping. Because I'm not an educator. I don't have expertise per se in pedagogy, other than I've taught, but no one taught me how to teach. I just teach, which is, I guess, you allow people who are adjuncts to do this. But I would say for younger people, how are we teaching our young people to be literate in this kind of environment? It goes along with, how do you teach young people to be financially literate? How do you teach them life skills? And so if educational systems don't do it only, I would say faith organizations can help. And that's as much as I can say. I don't know what else. Does anybody else have suggestions or any other thoughts? And is that an AI saying something? Did you ask ChatGPT? Yeah, I thought about putting it. I didn't know whether the internet was going to be strong enough. We could just all play together. That would be kind of fun. Maybe if somebody wants to play later, we can do that.
Harriet, I got a question.
Hey, Steve.
Yeah, what impact do you think AI have on financial markets?
It's already having an effect.
Well,
Yeah.
in what ways, though? I'm trying to figure out.
I'm just going to repeat the question for those
what
who are live
impact
streaming.
will AI have on financial markets? And by financial markets, one could say, stock markets, the buying and selling of equities, or predictions about where markets are going, or when you talk to your Fidelity advisor, are they investing in this sector, and are they using AI themselves? And they would be derelict if they were not using AI in some way now. They're using it to make predictions, but then they're using models. They have been using predictive models for a long time. I guess the question is, what kind of quality filters do they have before they allow it to make predictions that people really take to the bank, so to speak, and make investment decisions on? So I don't know. I do know that when I was at the Department of Financial Services, I was the head of cybersecurity. So one of the things we worked on, we pushed out an updated regulation that talked a lot about different kinds of risks, so encompass some of this, but then we started working on guidance for banks and insurance companies in New York about cybersecurity and AI. And so we started with the proposition that AI is being used by the bad guys and gals. How is it being used? How is it available to be used by the good people, the defenders? And then what should you be doing to understand that risk and making sure you're deploying enough so that you're defending using all the capabilities available? So that's still in the realm of posing questions and offering a framework, and not really isolating the actual significant problems, because we don't have enough experience yet. And I'm sure if you were closer to the operation, you'd be seeing some of this, but you're probably not sharing it with the world, and you're probably not sharing it with your regulator. Yeah.
Quick question. Harriet, thank you so much for this wonderful lecture. My question has to do with looking at the future and trying to anticipate what kind of consequence or punishment would be appropriate for the really bad actors, nationally and internationally.
Or the cynical answer, or the I don't know. I mean, I remember I was actually lobbying the White House and Congress in the late 1990s when the internet first arrived, as a way of doing commerce and generating value. And I remember in the mid to late 1990s, it was all about hands off, let the internet grow, and the U.S. should take a lead globally. That was the party line, no pun intended. It was just the line. Everyone agreed with that. And the only question was, okay, so how fast can industry go, and what can we do to make sure people aren't hurt? And it was a young and wonderful time. It was really nice. And now here we are in 2024, and what do we have? Yeah, the U.S. is an internet leader, and we have the companies that use advertising-supported models to collect a lot of information and deliver experiences to us that sometimes are helpful and sometimes are really, really bad. So what consequences are coming from that society-wide experimentation? The consequences that are coming are, people have made a lot of money. People have died because it's well understood now that the psychology of some of this overusage, leads to ideation about suicide and bad things and cyberbullying, all that. So people have died, people have made a lot of money, people have lost a lot of money. Our collective retirement portfolios have been lifted up because which investment advisor does not invest in FANG companies? Facebook, Amazon, right? Google. No, all of them do. It's like tobacco companies. Everyone was invested in the tobacco industry until they weren't. So the consequences that are coming are, partly because the wheels of justice turn slowly, is the U.S. Justice Department is investigating Google and trying to break it up at this point. Facebook has been regulatorily and from a civil litigation perspective the subject of a ton of actions that are trying to get it to stop things. You have some of the other larger household names. Now the tide has turned. So the tide has turned, and what that results in, just as it has resulted in prior generations where AT&T was broken up, IBM was the target of antitrust enforcement for decades before the resolution of those suits in the 90s, which in part led to the diminishment and the deterioration of IBM, and then the recovery of IBM later was a miracle, business miracle. So things are happening, but it's systemic consequences will be in changing the structure of some of these companies, and then the new entrants come in and disrupt even faster than the law is going to come. So I honestly don't know. I think it's a combination of consequences that probably to some of us are not enough, and they come slowly. And the question, I think, is that they've worked sort of in prior generations, but what's different about this is moving so fast that our institutions are not changing the pace at which they work. So the problem with this is that our institutions cannot keep pace, and I worry about that a lot. Actually, I just worry about that. So we'll see. But I mean, if a crime is a crime is a crime. A crime is a crime if you've committed a physical act. The crime is going to be a crime whether you used AR or you just use a knife. So that isn't going to change. And I think we have people more expert than I am here who actually have expertise in those kinds of consequences. But I think just because it's intermediated by a particular technology shouldn't change it. So but it might be harder or easier to track down who. The other policy debate, which is I don't even know if it's a debate, but it's an uncivil discourse that happens these days between those who think free speech is the main thing and platforms like X, formerly Twitter, should be uncensored, unrestrained, and be able to throw out anything. There's a debate between that philosophy and those who believe in some content moderation standards. That is also an example of what's happening. It has nothing to do with AI per se, but AI makes it worse. So should we start there and go like that maybe? Or back there and then we'll go that way?
I have a question about how AI is used in warfare and U.S. military and other militaries throughout the world.
I don't know.
Such as like selecting bombing targets.
That's beyond my knowledge. And if I think probably some of that is not available for people who don't need to know.
Well, there are numerous articles.
There are articles
that may or may not be accurate,
Don't know.
that talk about Where's Daddy or Lavender that uses AI to select targets to bomb with drones.
I would have a hard time believing that these kinds of capabilities are not being used in every single way they are possibly to be used, including just helping to isolate things that can be
How-
prioritized with some humans then deciding.
And that,
Yeah.
well, my understanding is that
Yeah.
humans aren't always involved in the
Yeah.
decision. But can you talk about international
I
humanitarian
don't know.
law?
Not my expertise. Yeah, not my expertise. And what I've also learned over the last 20 years is when you talk about cybersecurity, there's a huge difference between when you're talking about keeping like Shepherd University secure and the things you do to think about cyber attacks and what you do as an organization or as a person, and then on the other side, the law of war. The law of warfare and national security rules it's an entirely different sphere. And the law of war and cyber war, what constitutes a declaration of war in cyberspace, is what a lot of folks who have grown up in military law and national security law debate and think about as well. So that's not my area of expertise, but I've seen them and I've read about it to know it's a very different field. So it'll be interesting to see how it develops. Yes, ma'am?
Talking the first item up there, trusting information.
Yeah.
I was just visiting my brother, and he is of the opinion that anything that is digital can be changed. So he doesn't trust Wikipedia at all because somebody can go in and hack it.
Yeah.
He thinks we all ought to go back to our printed encyclopedias and
Right.
newsprint and
Yeah.
hold on to those so
Yeah.
that we have the facts.
Yeah, good luck with that. Yeah, that's, yeah, I mean, that's pragmatism. I understand that. And, after a while, we'll see. But, Wikipedia is one of the best sources, actually, because anybody can get in and correct. So that's probably where I go first. If something's sole sourced, I think about that twice. I look for many eyes on something.
We can take one more question, and then we can move out and discuss.
Yeah,
in
you're
the
not prisoners, so
reception.
you can all move away.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Hi. I really appreciate your presentation. It was very, very helpful and really kind of up to date. In the world of academia,
Yeah.
and higher ed especially,
Are you a professor?
I am.
Yeah, good. Yeah.
I had my class last year and maybe the year before when ChatGPT came out, so probably in 22 or so, or that spring. I had my students research what the Ivy League schools were doing or whatever college they were interested in terms of their policies. And I found that the Ivy League schools were in fact using ChatGPT. They were reframing how to learn and what students should be doing, and it was very exciting to me.
Yeah.
But the school that I was teaching in, which isn't Shepherd's, and I don't know Shepherd's policies, was banning it and reprimanding people if
Right.
they were doing it. And I was there saying, well, how do you put it in as a citation, and how do you put it in under references? And they were like, what?
Yeah.
So I'm
Yeah.
wondering about the rights of students and even faculty in terms of learning, because clearly there is a whole new set of skills
Yes.
that are needed for
Agreed.
young people to be able to validate the information, to use it for their learning, because it is the future. So do students and faculty have any rights to be able to use this tool in a broader
I think
sense?
I would not frame that question that way, because as soon as you say, do you have rights, it sounds very binary and
Right.
it sounds combative.
Okay.
Now, which I know you don't mean it to be.
No, I just...
Unless you do mean it to be, which in case it's fine. But
Well,
I think the way I would phrase it is there is a phenomenon that is happening here that's hugely relevant to pedagogy and the future of our students
Right.
and the institution. And so I would say if an institution doesn't have an AI committee or task force or something that's looking at all the different ways it should be exploring this stuff, it's like, what? You need it right now. For example, this is public, and I don't know what's happening in West Virginia, but in the state of New York, the governor of New York has an AI task force. She has directed all the agencies to figure out what they're doing, just as the U.S. government has done, all the agencies. The agency I was a part of, in turn, said, what are we doing? And was looking at how it operates and how that kind of capability could be used to help make policy or run the place better. And then we were all looking at where do we need to have guidance or whatever else in the regulated entities. For a university or it's like, what's our policy for citation of this kind of work, for accessing this kind of capability when it's like anybody can sign up for free in an instant? What is our policy about being transparent about its use, or saying in certain the context of assignments or in examinations, thou shalt not use it? Those are the kinds of conversations that should be had. Yeah, and so cutting it off is short-sighted, and it probably won't last. It probably won't last. They'll change their mind. Yeah, good question. Good one to add on. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.